So we can see some issues with the ground here. I guess I didn't attach it as well. Yeah, these parts weren't touching the ground. That's fine, I suppose. It'll be harder to deal with, but that's fine. I'm just going to select all these and then, change my selection method back and delete those. So now this base has been trimmed to fit the ground around it. And as you can see from the inside, it fits pretty perfectly. The only problem is we still have borders, and that's not good. So you want to select the borders on the wall's edge and expand those. So I'm going to go over to here. It's hard to get only the wall's borders. There we go. Those are the wall's borders. So what I'm going to do is expand the borders on the walls just a tiny bit. Let's try by like 99.9%. No, too low. Okay, you can use these to edit them. Edit their size is very small. Okay. Then I'm going to go back here because I see the problem with this one since I didn't intersect it with the ground correctly. I'm going to pull this back. Strangely angled. I see the problem. Yeah, it's definitely strangely angled. You can see this edge right here. This whole polygon is wrong, so I'm going to delete that one because it's facing wrong. Interesting. There's a very frustrating edge right here. It seems I'm going to have to leave it about here because of the way it's attached to the walls here. So that's fine, I suppose. Let's just see where it starts. Right here. Okay, we'll leave it right there. Our goal was basically to create this little gap between the two, because as you might have predicted, we're going to select two parts of a gap and bridge them together. Now, did that really save us time over creating our own geometry using the stitching techniques, using polygon create? Yeah. Yeah, it really did. Imagine, if you will, here we have let's click out of there. Let's go to our polygon and then create. Okay, we have two vertexes here. We have two vertexes here. How would you like to have to move back and forth every time you click? Or try to do it surgically from 1,000,000 miles away? Or try to do it from here, where you have these two, that, that, and no vertex over here to connect it to. So you have to go all the way back to over here. So being able to connect it by edge is a huge help. Okay, we're gonna do this technique to one more thing before we move on, and that is to a pillar. Or I was originally gonna do a pillar, but I'm gonna do a different object this time. Let's do a not a sphere because I don't want to deal with the problems. Let's deal with a pyramid. Sure. You guys get to have a little pyramid in your base. No, actually, that's way too easy. It does need to be circular. Okay, how about a torus? But I don't want it to be a whole torus, because that's going to be weird in the map. How about an arc torus? So like this. So I'm going to convert this to a mesh and then delete half the polygons in it. There we go. Something like this would be a nightmare to put into most maps in a flat surface, because if you look at our surface right here, there are no extra polygons here. We didn't tessellate it. So in order to put it in, we'd have to attach it, destroy this ground, and then rebuild it by creating from one vertex to here. You get the point. I don't like that. So what we're going to do is the old binomial trick. Take the whole object, move it down here, make sure backface cull is on before we try anything. Compound objects, Boolean, union, pick operand B. You'll see it disappeared anyway. That's interesting, I find. I'm going to reseed it. Oh, I did make it a mesh. But this is a poly. Make sure they're the same thing. Sorry. So if you have a mesh and a poly, it's going to freak out. Just make sure they're both the same thing here. Or actually, let's turn this back into a mesh rather. Rather than change that into a poly. There. Okay. And now we can apply a Boolean and join them together. So yeah, make sure they're both meshes before you try a Boolean. And that's going to freak out parts of the map when it's trying to do it, but for the most part, our ground is still one piece, basically. There's no messed up geometry or anything like that. Let's go over to it. Let's go underground and see how we did here. We want to delete these parts right here, so let's convert the whole thing back into a poly. Yep. I think an easier way would be to unselect it, or deselect it rather, using my paint here. So I only have those selected, and then delete those, and everything else is good. Okay. Go to border for each of these. Expand the border out a little bit. This is a bit... Oh, I have all the borders selected. That's a mistake. Let's have... yeah, see. So with back facing gone, I'm trying to select the ground border. Which is unfortunate because they really are right next to each other. So you know what? I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm just going to shrink down this border a little bit. And you can see it looks like they're already connected. That's not true. Shrink down that border. Ah, that one I was able to select the border too. Okay. Doesn't really matter for our purposes right now, as long as they're both like that. So I'm going to leave that like there. Now I'm going to select those, go back to paint, get off the scale function, and you can link these together about 2 at a time, as long as you don't have this third thing. There we go. So I'm just going to go around selecting 2 at a time. And just quickly bridge them together. And why is it 2 at a time? Because bridge freaks out when you try going 3. See, it's terrible. So do it 2 at a time. And by 2, I don't mean like 2, like these are 2, but I mean 2 corresponding, whatever, edges. And if it's still freaking out, then yeah, go to a different amount. And check with here, with your wireframe, or in this case I have edged faces on, so that's up here, by the way, edged faces. So I can see the wireframe at all times. So I don't know, this ended up being 4 edges, so it ended up being messed up no matter what I tried. So I still had to do just the adjacent edges at a time. But you can see this works, and it's a lot faster than going vertex by vertex. Let's go over here and do that. And there we go. We now have a base that looks like that. Let me take off edged faces so that you can actually see. We now have a base that looks like that, with a weird old thing sticking out of the ground that looks like that. How about we add some cliffs, shall we? Select the walls. Let's tessellate those a little bit. I actually don't see tessellation on a poly, so I'm going to go back to a mesh. You'll see the walls keep changing. Oh no, not this time. That's good. Okay, so walls are selected. I'm not going to... sure, actually, let's mess with the back. So back wall. Alright, I'm just going to tessellate these a little bit. Actually, let's tessellate them face center. And you'll see it gives this nice cliffish kind of thing already. I'm going to go to the vertex. I'm just going to pull these in. Now, I said I'm going to make this an indoor map, so I'm not going to make these like cliff walls, but they're going to be more like cave walls. I'm not sure if there's a huge difference to that, but you'll see I'm just pulling in these vertexes towards the map. This is a very quick way of making cliff walls. There are better ways, but that's just really quick. Let's go over here. This is where we're going to put our tunnel. But I'm going to show you something in a moment as to how I'm going to build that tunnel instead of tessellating the entire wall. So before we do that, there's one last important thing that you need to know. Errors.